90% of the Shopify stores that you see online will never become real brands. At least, not what I would consider a real brand. And the reason has almost nothing to do with the product. And it's definitely not because the ads don't work. But if you're currently watching this video, you might be one of these people that is currently trying to build your own at the moment, or you may have thought of building one. And I'll be completely honest with you. The truth is, most of these Shopify stores that you see were never meant to become a brand in the first place. There are 3 reasons why this happens. Before I start going into those, I can tell you that reason number 3 is one of the most important that almost nobody talks about. But first, let me give you a little bit of context. I've been into e-commerce since 2013, so quite some time now, and I've seen the cycles. I've seen how people started like with dropshipping, then transitioning into brands, then doing their agencies, and eventually getting into SaaS. And why am I saying this is because I've actually followed the exact same path. And since 2013, this is exactly what I've done. Started with dropshipping, I transitioned into brands, then later had my own agency where I've helped founders like to start from scratch essentially and go to multi 7 figures per month, but also help like the bigger companies that were already established, like doing probably around 7 figures a month already, pushing them past like the 8-figure month. And after seeing all that, one thing becomes very clear. The pattern is always the same every time. A lot of the stores are not built for equity, they're built for cash flow. And to be honest, there's nothing wrong with that because I think it's actually smart to start lean. But the thing is, it's a mistake to stay in that phase forever, unless you're actually looking to build some short-term cash flow, and that's completely fine. You're doing just right. In fact, you've probably seen one of these stores before, or even found yourself in this kind of situation. Let me just describe this to you. You've got your Shopify store, you start uploading one product, maybe multiple. Then you start building up your theme, everything looks clean. Now you're ready, you launch your first campaign on Meta, TikTok, or even Google Ads. Then you get your first sale. If everything is profitable, then you increase the budget. If not, then you just move on and test another product. You rinse and repeat that process until things starts to look good on the surface level, right? But then underneath the surface, you hardly know your customers because you don't necessarily have a defined customer avatar beyond age and gender. You have no back-end offers. You do not have any retention system and probably no long-term positioning. Does that sound familiar? If so, then this is an unfinished brand. And there's nothing wrong with it because I believe this is just a starting phase. But the goal is not to stay there. So I would like to tell you a little bit more about this through the first reason why I said before, most of the Shopify stores that you see online will never turn into brands. Most Shopify stores starts with the products in mind, while real brands actually starts with the positioning in mind. So if I had to translate this, the product thinking in mind first sounds something like, what is currently selling right now? Let's call it like positioning in mind first, will sound more something like, who is this for? And what does it matter? So when you start thinking with product in mind first, you'll end up competing on price. If you start thinking of positioning in mind first, you'll end up competing on meaning. So if I have to give you a concrete example to even better understand what I'm saying here is, let's say 2 stores that are selling the exact same product. Store 1 sells it as, let's call it high quality ergonomic office chair. The second one will sell it like built for founders or built for remote founders that are sitting 8 hours plus a day and value their long-term posture. Same product, complete different positioning. One will be competing on price, the other one will be competing on meaning, or we could even say on identity. So right now the question you have to ask yourself is If you have a brand or like a store, do you know your customer beyond just anything beyond that age and gender? Let's call it this way. And if not, or are you actually relying on the algorithm to kind of figure it out randomly? If the answer is that your only main differentiator right now is your product itself, then you don't have a brand yet. All you have is inventory. Now let's assume your store is making some sales now. The second reason why I see most stores will never become brands is simply because of something called margin blindness. If you've never heard of it, I will explain it to you. I see a lot of founders, they get caught up, if not obsessed, with revenue screenshots. They get all excited, they track their ROAS, they celebrate like when they start scaling and then obviously increasing their spend as things are looking good. But they don't really understand what their break-even ROAS or break-even point is. So the truth is, when you don't know that, you don't really know what's your real margin. When you start taking out fulfillment, transaction costs, potential refunds, chargebacks, because they do happen, like let's be honest. But the other thing is they probably don't even have a retention system or structure in place. I don't even talk about back-end monetization. So the truth is, revenue is vanity, but margin is survival. So your revenue will not pay for your bills, but your margin will. So if you don't understand what your break-even ROAS is, you're actually not scaling a business. You're gambling ad spend. And this is a very dangerous spot to be in. But let's put this into an example. Let's say you sell a product like for $60, $20 for the product cost, $10 for shipping, then maybe 3 to 4% on transaction fees, and maybe some potential percentage that are eating up this profit because technically you'll get some refunds. Then the thing is, your margins are already not looking exactly like what you thought, but you haven't even taken into consideration that you may have some other overheads such as Shopify subscriptions or other apps, and also maybe VA cost. But because the account looks good, then you're scaling as the ROAS is looking profitable, let's call it. That's where a lot of people go wrong, and that's why I think a lot of people will never actually get a brand to what it should be, because they're bleeding profit very quietly, and it will catch them off guard. If they don't have their numbers dialed in, they don't know what their real margins and break even is. And that's what real brands are actually doing. They don't just scale what works on the account, but they actually structure what works. And the third reason is the one that quietly killed most of the stores. They never built assets. So let me put it this way. Traffic is rented, but audience is owned. If you think about it, don't get me wrong, ads is actually very powerful, especially at the start. And in fact, it's probably the fastest way to validate a product on the market. But if you're solely relying on ads to run your business, then you're actually exposed. Let's say you have no email depth, you have no retention system, no content ecosystem, no audience that you actually own. If we were to turn off the ads, would your business survive? That's a real question, because the truth is, real brands actually compound because they build a strong relationship with their audience, not because they're being just transactional. So if I put it to you right now, you just have to think, all right, if I was to turn everything off right now, what should I have in place in order to get repeat purchases and maybe customers coming back even without the ads? Because that's when you're actually building a strong asset. So you're no longer just acquiring customers, but you're actually owning an audience, which is your asset. And that's when you start differentiating yourself. And this is what really separates, in my eyes, like people that have a brand from people that are just running stores for the sake of running stores. So the other thing I want to bring to you is, if you think in 30-day cycles, then you're most likely building a 30 days business. But if you think in 3 years cycles, then you're actually building a 3 years asset. And that's what's very important, because the time horizon of the founder is what determines the structure of the company. So right now, remember this one. Do not just acquire clients or customers, but just build an audience so that you can actually own an asset. So now, I've gone through the 3 reasons, but I want to tell you again, so what's a real brand then? If you've come that far into the video, you probably understand that first, you need to understand your customer deeply. This is not just age and gender, but understanding the motivations, the psychology, and even the identity. And we could even put the objections of these people. The next thing is, you need to understand or know your numbers. You need to know your margins. You need to know what your break-even point is, but most importantly, your lifetime value of your customers. The third one is, you build retention intentionally. You don't just hope people will come back, you're actually designing for it. And the last thing that I will tell you is that you have to have a long time horizon. You cannot be looking at it in weeks, but instead look at it in years. This will give you the right perspective to actually build a real brand with a recurring revenue, and that way you're no longer chasing revenue, but you're actually building for equity. I'm curious now, are you currently building for short-term cash flow or long-term equity? Comment brand if you're building for equity, or comment cash flow if you're still in the testing phase. You can even send this over to one of your friends if they're stuck around 3 to 5K per month. It might even be helpful. But one thing I'd like to mention here, and probably wrap this up, is that most founders fail not because they're incapable, but they fail because they take too much time to change their thinking. And to be completely honest with you, there's nothing wrong with building income. But if you want to build something that actually lasts, it's best to build for equity. And that's what I will leave you with. I'll see you on to the next video.